was for the best. Then, while still holding the assault rifle to the head of the kneeling Choi Yol, the sergeant told him that he had been arrested. Upon hearing this, the people who heard the sergeant's words became furious and indignant, shouting for the guy to be forced to give up all his glasses, some even suggesting that he kill the crook. However, Go Haiju, who was holding back the angry crowd, firmly told them to remain calm. At the same moment, Sergeant Kwon Jae-yong leaned over to the protagonist and told him to run away, adding that he should find a way to get out of here and then make things right, which was all he could offer him at the moment. Hearing this, Choi Yol's eyes widened in surprise. However, realizing that this was his only chance that could not be missed, he clenched his hand into a fist with firm determination. Then, under the gaze of the angry crowd who started shouting asking what he was doing, Choi Yol opened a game store and started buying dexterity characteristics for points. In the next moment, he jumped into the air at a great speed and disappeared, leaving behind the puzzled looks of the crowd, who did not immediately realize what had happened. After most of the crowd came to their senses and realized what had happened, there were angry cries that the crook who had taken everything from them had fled. But they had no time for indignation and cursing the guy, because the next moment they heard the sounds of notifications from system windows from everywhere. They displayed the information that there were 24 hours left until the next move. This information shocked everyone, as there was very little time for a break and preparation. The outraged and pitiful cries were heard again. However, Sergeant Kwon Jae-yong, who realized that their complaints would not change anything, started shouting for everyone to go to safe areas as soon as possible. Hearing his command, people began to evacuate quickly, some running as fast as they could to get a better spot while others helped the wounded. But in the midst of all the chaos, a girl with a spear in her hands stood in the middle of the street without moving. It was none other than Go Haiju, who was staring resolutely into the distance. In front of the huge crowd of gathered citizens, there was a man standing on a dais who addressed the people and said that those who wanted to fight should stand on the left, while those who wanted to evacuate should stand on the right. He also reminded everyone to check their status window more often and not to leave the evacuation center without permission. In addition, everyone also needed to remember where the temporary bases were as well as the other evacuation centers. However, one of the most important rules was that they had to immediately run away as soon as they saw Choi Yol. Covering their ears, they had to run away from him as soon as possible and then report his whereabouts to the authorities. Also, if anyone heard any advice from him about the raid, that person should isolate themselves until the mission is over. At the same time, the silhouette of some guy was drawing some red circle on the ground. Drawing with red chalk on the floor, he could hear the rules that were announced in the square, specifically that if someone was a victim of sovereignty but hid it from the public, it would be considered a violation of the law and would be punished accordingly. The guy drawing the circle was our protagonist Choi Yol. After the ground rules were announced to the public, the town was back to life, though not quite as it had been before. After all, they now had a very important task, namely to survive in this damn game. Everyone was doing what they could, the military was developing tactics. Some were training, hoping to get stronger. Others were standing in line for groceries to meet their minimum needs, namely food. Some got into fights, while others went to church hoping to be saved there. But one way or another, the time for a new move had come. And the players who were playing a game in which millions of lives were at stake once again rolled their dice. Pawn 8, which was the city in which these events were taking place, had to move 4 squares forward. After moving 4 squares, the figure arrived at the seal of the Demon King, which was announced by a system window that appeared in front of everyone. The people's task was to destroy all the demonic pillars that would appear, as well as the defenders that would guard them. In case of failure to do so in the allotted time, the Demon King would be summoned. The time allotted to complete the mission was 5 days. While the number of pillars that needed to be destroyed was 3. The level of the first pillar defender, however, was level 1. He was the fallen angel of fate, who was a fallen angel who wandered around in search of his destiny. Even though he had 2 pairs of wings that gave him a resemblance to the concept of an angel, he did look creepy. The difficulty of the second pillar protector was also like the first one, was at level 1. The second defender's name was Mad Brains. He had a metallic physique that resembled the body of a praying mantis, while his head had huge brains protruding outwards. As the information from the system window stated, it was a creature that couldn't stop creating things, and the more time it spent creating things, the better the things it created were. The difficulty of the third pillar protector was different from the first two, however, as it was equal to level 3. After reading this information, Go Haiju and Kwon Jae-yong were stunned as this difficulty was many times harder than the first two. In front of some large building, a large pillar appeared where the ground used to be, the crystal at the end of which was burning red. At the foot of it stood the figure of a creature whose build resembled that of a human, but its skin was green in color. According to the information from the notification window, it was a defender of the pillar of the third difficulty, namely the goblin swordsman Jack. He was a swordsman goblin who had reached the peak of martial arts and had undergone a body transformation. In addition, he was trying to break the seal of the Demon King to challenge him. At the same time, Choi Yol was lying on the ground, right on the circle he had drawn himself. There were many pieces of paper scattered around him, with some circles and text drawn on them. If you looked closer, you could see a smile on his face. At the same time, the bewildered Sergeant Kwon Jae-yong who was holding a walkie-talkie received an urgent message that the civilians had launched an attack. Then a voice added that even though they tried to stop them, they were almost impossible to control. After listening to the information, Kwon Jae-yong said with determination that it was time for them to take over as well. Then turning to Go Haiju, he asked what she was going to do. But there was no answer. The soldier she was standing next to a moment ago said that she had left. Hearing the soldier's words, he thought about the mess that was going on. Their perfect system and cooperation had fallen in just one day. At the same time, the escaped girl, holding her spear in her hand, stood in front of the pillar under which the third-level defender was sitting. Adopting a fighting stance, she looked at the opponent in front of her with determination in her gaze. Who was even just sitting relaxedly by the pillar, exuding a blue aura. However, Go Haiju's determination was unstoppable. In the next moment, she rushed straight at the defender, activating her new ability that made her hair glow a bright golden color, as well as displaying her legendary level spear, which she intended to use to strike. In the next second, it actually reached its target, causing a loud explosion to occur. However, despite its force, to the girl's surprise, the defender was not only unharmed, but as if he had not made any effort to put his sword in front of him, he was able to stop her spear without much effort. In the next moment, with a slight movement, he swung his sword. It was only this slight movement that threw the girl back. Then raising the sword, which began to glow with a blue light upwards, he brought it down with speed imperceptible to the human eye. At that instant, a white line of light appeared in front of the girl, who was still in the air, which seemed to have already split her head in half. A monstrously powerful explosion sounded in the middle of the city, which was accompanied by the release of a shockwave of blue aura. The goblin defender sitting under the pillar looked up for the first time with a look of mild bewilderment in his eyes. Not far from him, someone landed on the ground. As it turned out, it was Choi Yol, who held the surprised Go Haiju in his arms and stepped onto the ground. Putting the girl on the ground, he asked her to inform his men that he would spend all their rewards on himself. Hearing this, the girl irritably replied that it was already obvious. Leaving her behind and heading towards the pillar under which the protector was sitting, he added that she should also tell her people not to appear in front of him if they didn't want him to steal their rewards. The girl wanted to say something to Choi Yol who was leaving. However, he materialized his book in the next moment and it immediately appeared in his hand. Holding the open book in his hand, the guy headed towards the pillar while thinking that there was no way to give people their experience points back, nor was there any way to escape from the Demon King's damn book. By status, he said, turning to the system window, which at the same moment opened the store and informed him that his level would be raised by 1 for every unit of characteristic. When Go Haiju asked the system what number he needed to set to increase his skills, he replied with a smile on his face that everything needed to be maxed out. Suddenly, the system window started sending Go Haiju a bunch of notifications to the bewildered Go Haiju who didn't understand what was going on. However, they didn't just come to her, but to everyone who was trapped in the game. Seeing the notifications that Choi Yol was the first person to reach level 100 in stamina, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, luck, and health, a lot of people were furious and held a grudge because they realized that it was all thanks to their points. At the same time, Choi Yol, who was surrounded by a golden aura, was surprised by his new strength and asked the system how many equipment dices he had received. The system immediately said that the total was 432,512. Hearing this, he ordered the system to get rid of everything below magic class, and also automatically cast all the dice for anything that would give equipment above heroic class. As a result, the system counted 142 pieces of legendary class equipment, as well as 1,023 heroic. In the next moment, the guy received a notification that the system had tagged all the items he had received, causing a cylinder to form around Choi Yol. Glowing with a bright light and also consisting of hologram windows with the weapons he had received. Go Haiju was shocked by what she saw, looking at it all with wide-opened eyes, while the goblin protector smiled happily, seeing the guy as a worthy opponent. The same decided to himself that he would use all the items, bloody rewards, as well as the power of the Demon King. Being equipped with the best equipment, holding a sword in one hand and an open book in the other, Choi Yol decided to himself that he would protect this city at all costs and then return to his normal life. Since if this was the only way to atone for his sins, he didn't care if he was judged or insulted by others or not. As he continued to sit under the pillar, as the system window said that Goblin Swordsman Jack was beginning to smile and prepare to attack at the sight of a strong opponent, he did indeed begin to smile, and a more intense aura began to emanate from him, which made it clear that he was excited about the fight. However, to the goblin's surprise, Choi Yol, who was equipped with heroic-grade magical air shoes that allowed the wearer to jump and soar with a force comparable to flight while expending the wearer's mana, turned to say that he didn't have time to play with him right now. He then shot into the sky and shouted for him to wait for him, promising that he would be back soon. Seeing this, Go Haiju wondered if Choi Yol would really just leave like that. She turned her gaze to the goblin swordsman who was staring at the floor again. She also couldn't understand why he just sat down as if he really intended to wait for the guy. At the same time jumping at a tremendous speed between buildings, leaving behind only residual images. Choi Yol was approaching the first pillar defender at a great speed. Since the goblin didn't attack first, it could be left alone and untouched for now. Sensing the approaching danger, the fallen soul angel fearfully turned towards the danger. However, this didn't save him from Choi Yol's foot, which slammed into his face in the next second. Looking at the defender who had his foot on his face at this moment, Choi Yol said to himself that the first thing he had to do was to fight the other defenders. While the people who saw Choi Yol's appearance shouted angrily and violently that he should be killed, Choi Yol continued to fight the first pillar's protector, moving lightning fast across the sky and houses. As he moved at breakneck speed through the air and holding his sword in his hand, he remembered what he had read in the book, namely the information that the unique trait of the pillar protector would be activated if the right conditions were met. These traits added weaknesses to the defender, thus increasing the chances of defeating him. Striking again at the defender who was able to dodge successfully after reacting in time, Choi Yol also realized that if the wrong conditions were met, strong traits could be unlocked that would be difficult to deal with. After dodging the guy's attack, the angel protector immediately rushed to counterattack, waving his clawed hands, which despite its appearance was a very formidable weapon. In the case of this defender he was fighting at the moment, if he killed 100 people, he would become a fallen angel who would be capable of destroying all of humanity. In addition to becoming much stronger, he would also be able to leave the pillar to start killing everything in his path. Drawing his sword and swinging it forcefully, thus cutting off the angelic bird's wings, Choi Yol decided that he had to start by getting rid of the guardians with those annoying traits and unlocking the traits that were necessary for the mission. The angel guardian shedding its wings began to fall to the ground. Taking advantage of this, the protagonist sped up with the help of his magical boots, allowing him to walk on air. He headed after it, reflecting on the fact that the most important thing was not the completion of the mission, but how it was completed. At the same time, a military truck was driving along the road, which had a huge number of holes and cracks. In the cab of the truck sat the already known to us Sergeant Kwon Jae-young, who talking to someone on the radio reported the order, which was to stand at least 500 meters from the pillars. Since they were not yet sure of the purpose of Choi Yol's intervention. As he finished talking and looked out the window, he wondered if the guy had never found a way to return the reward, or if he had just decided not to do it at all. Kwon Jae-young thought back to the time he had spent with him and noted that he was not a bad person, but he decided not to make a decision based on his feelings.